Okay, hi everybody. It's pretty exciting to see you all coming in. I'll just give you a second to all get in to the chat here. Okay, hello everyone.
Hi,
Hello
hi
there.
Rose.
Hi Rose.
Nice. Hi everybody.
Wow, loads of people coming in now. Hi Alex, hi Ancha, Binky, hello. Okay, hi Jem, Mary, Mitchell. Wow, this is exciting. Lots and lots of people coming in.
That's awesome. Thank you guys for being here. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so exciting. This is an exciting event for sure. Okay, hi everybody. I'm just going to give it another moment just to allow everybody to get in before I launch into the introductions.
Hi, Sia.
Okay, I hope you've all had a really fun day so far. I guess some of you will be here from all different places, all different kind of parts of the world tonight. Well, it's tonight for me. It's good morning for other people.
Good morning.
Yeah. Hi, Sia. Yeah, I always make this mistake every single time I do one of these, broadcasts. I'm like, good night. It's not nighttime for most people.
That's okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna. What's that? Okay, I'm just going to launch into the introduction here for Catherine, who I'm sure I don't need to introduce to most of you, but I'm going to take the time to introduce anyway. So welcome to this very special question and answer session today. I have the great privilege and honour of introducing Catherine Bobkoski, who you all know and love as an instructor and coach at New Masters Academy. Catherine is an LA-based artist who trained at the Watts Atelier, Grand Central Academy, and New York University. She's a figurative painter with a passion for flowers. Her skill and knowledge about drawing and painting is phenomenal, and Catherine is generous with sharing that knowledge with her students. She's a wonderful communicator, and her lessons are quite simply beautiful as she makes the most complex subjects and techniques accessible through her ability to clarify exactly what to do. This shows the dedication and preparation that Catherine puts into each and every lesson. She embodies the spirit of learning, exploration, and getting to know your materials, and has guided countless students with her encouraging and thoughtful approach that makes every one of her students strive to be the best version of themselves. She has been instrumental in shaping the coaching program at New Masters Academy, where she weaves the threads of art history, technique, and personal growth as she inspires her students. Okay, so Catherine.
Jeez Louise.
Lovely to meet you.
What an intro, golly. Thank you, Mary. It's a good thing I didn't write that because
Yeah.
I just would have been like, I don't know. She just like whatever, does some stuff. Who cares?
Yeah, and on a purely personal level, you're one of my absolute inspirations as a teacher and a coach as well. So this is an absolute honor for
That
me.
means
Okay,
so
so
much
I'm
coming
going
from
to.
you, Marion. Oh my God, because I think you're so inspiring. Wow, thank you.
So I'm going to lead off with a question that I think is a fabulous question. You've said that learning never stops. What kind of stuff are you still
Oh my
learning?
God.
Do you continue to put work into your weaker areas, or do you spend more time polishing what you're already good at?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I am still always learning. I think I think you can in some ways do both of those things at the same time because if you're directing your focus and your attention and your efforts towards the areas where you want to be really, really highly skilled, well, of course, you're still going to be learning in that area, even if it's quite a narrow thing. So I feel like I'm learning all the time more about uh, painting, about paint application, and about observing color and painting flowers and observing flowers and stuff like that, which probably sounds like, well, that's just what you already do. So you're just doing more of the same thing. But it's really not. It's really a kind of depth of learning, kind of a fanatical learning about one little narrow thing that is inexhaustible. So in that way, yeah, I think I'm always learning. Certainly, I do. I do try to broaden my horizons a little bit for sure. And I maybe don't always, share it all the time on Instagram or in classes or whatever. But I mean, one weak area that I feel is I feel strongly is a weak area for me anyway, is composition. And so I'm always trying to work on understanding that better. And I really do think that that is a lifelong process. Um, I think no matter how good you are at composing pictures, there is always more to learn, just absolutely. That is a never ending well. So I'm always trying to work on that more, but also I'm always trying to learn other things too, besides art. I try to read a lot. I try to learn about other areas. I get interested in other topics that are maybe only tangentially related to art, but I think it does well, like kind of like Bill Perkins was saying just yesterday, and he had such a great Q&A. That was so fun. But he said basically go and have experiences, go experience life, go learn other things, go do other stuff, and that makes you like a richer, more rounded person, and that makes you also a better artist. And I do absolutely think that that's true. So yeah.
That's a wonderful answer. I've just got a little bit of a
Sure.
follow-up here. What is it about flowers in particular that really excites you? And I mean, clearly you have such a passion for it. What is it that draws you to painting flowers?
Well, yeah. Flowers to me are very symbolic of life, of regeneration, of the cycle of death and rebirth. It's kind of a resurrection, when you go to a rose garden in January and it's just like a bunch of little sticks poking up out of the ground covered in thorns. It looks like there's nothing there. And if you go, today in mid-July, it'll be absolutely teeming with life and full of buds and blooming flowers, and then flowers that are already probably by now going to rose hips or just, starting to wilt and fall apart. And to me, I think that that is just such a powerful image of the continuity of life, that everything, progresses forward always, everything moves onward and outward and nothing collapses. I think that image is very inspiring. And I think that's one thing about why we make art, right? I mean, a rose is making a flower, a rose plant is making a flower so that it can survive, so that it can continue and reproduce and extend life forward. And in the midst of that, it makes this incredibly beautiful thing. And isn't that what we're doing as artists, right? We're trying to progress our life forward, bring something that is going to last longer than ourselves, and we make a beautiful thing in the process. So something like that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I've got to go to this question next from someone in the chat who's called Rose. I mean, how could I not go to this?
We love you, Rose.
So her question is, have you got advice for a teenager who is at art college, not university, who feels they are not being taught technical skills?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, that does happen. I find it actually very disappointing. I'm not going to name any institutions because I'm not sure that's the right thing to do, but I have heard recently about some big art institutions, art colleges, art schools that are expensive, that don't teach color theory, that don't teach drawing, that don't teach, just don't teach basic art skills. So if you're in such a place, I was kind of saying earlier about always learning. Don't rely on that institution to give you everything. Just know now, and it's good that you know now, that they're not going to be maybe really willing to give you technical skills in certain areas. They might give you other things. There might be other things that are valuable that you get from that experience. But you have to take some responsibility, a lot of responsibility for your own education, which is true whether or not you're at an art college. I think if you're just at a regular university, you still have to be responsible for your own education. I think that's maybe even more true for artists, unfortunately, because your learning is lifelong, and maybe you're just learning to really embrace that lesson a bit earlier. So when you're not in class, by the way, this is what I did when I was in college, but when you're not in class, go find other places to learn, go take live classes or do courses on New Masters Academy. If there's life drawing sessions in your area, go to those as often as you can, every week if possible. Go draw from life. Go outside to draw, go observe natural light, go plein air sketching or plein air painting as often as you can. Just go take responsibility basically for your own education. And even if you're doing that on top of art school already, well, welcome to being an artist. It is your life now. So just might as well embrace it now and get used to it. I think it is really unfortunate that you don't necessarily get a lot of those really important fundamental skills in an institution like that. But whether you were there or not, you would have to be taking responsibility for your own education and really embracing that and doing 2x the work, 3x the work in order to get as much out of it, as much growth and as much learning as possible out of it. And you're starting now. So anyway, Rose, I hope that helps you. But please ask for a follow-up if you want any, by the way.
Okay, that was a great answer as well. Okay, so we've got a question from Binky. Yep. Okay, so what is your favorite and least favorite flower?
Well, favorite, I feel like everyone should just know. Well, I don't expect you guys to know stuff about
Put
me.
it in the chat. What's the favorite flower? Write it down.
It's roses. Yes, I love painting roses. That's absolutely my favorite. Especially garden roses. When you go to the grocery store and you get those little kind of like tight swirly things, they're very commercial looking. I'll still paint those, it's fine. But garden roses, which are just so much more gorgeous and voluptuous and ethereal, that's really what I like to paint. Yeah, David Austin roses. I used to grow those back when I had a yard. But yeah, David Austin roses are so beautiful. But my least favorite, lilies, daylilies, or calla lilies, even worse. Yeah, calla lilies. Don't really like those so much. It's something about the texture, I think. Or plastic. Someone in the chat said plastic. Yeah, actually, fake flowers would definitely be on the very, very bottom of my list. But if we're talking about real flowers, probably daylilies or calla lilies. Just because of the something about the texture is just not as delicate and ethereal and beautiful to me. It's like a much heavier kind of texture that doesn't excite me as much. But yeah, thank you for the question, Pinky.
Okay, so I've got another question here that looks like a really interesting one from Mary. I'm also interested in learning more about color theory. I'm good at mixing what I see, but I am learning reality does not always harmonize great on a canvas. I see photographs of how you mix your palettes, and it would be nice to hear more about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Kind of a technical question, but I love those. So if you see me on Instagram posting pictures of my palette, and there's little, like, they're called color strings. So I'll have like a row that's all the same hue, but it's mixed into different values. And then I'll have like maybe 4 or 5 of those. And the idea with that is that it's very helpful for keeping my values organized, because when you line up all of the strings like that, vertically, vertically, they line up as being all the same value. So you have the same value in each column, and in each row you have the same hue. So it makes it very easy, not easy, none of this is easy, but it makes it a little bit more simple to keep your values organized. And then you can think more about what is the specific hue and what is the range of, or the level of saturation that I need for a particular area. And then you just select the right value for what you need in that moment. But then how do you pick the colors? How do you decide what color strings to mix? And that, at least for what I do, that involves really carefully looking at the subject, really carefully looking at the flower and the background and the foliage and whatever else might be in the scene, and going through a process of discernment of analyzing and identifying specific hues, and then figuring out what are the actual colors in my paint box, what are the actual pigments that will help me to achieve something in the same realm as that, or something close to that. Not always exactly that, because as artists, we have very limited tools. Nature paints with light, we paint with little puddles of mud. So you have to think more about capturing a kind of likeness, or the same value relationships, or relationships within the hues and colors and ranges of saturation that are going to get at an idea of what you're seeing, or the feeling of what you're seeing, not exactly what you're seeing. And I find that the best way to do that is with a very limited range of colors. So when you look at what the palette looks like, if I post a picture of that or whatever, it probably looks like a lot of colors. It's like, oh my God, there's like 20 little piles of paint there, or 30 little piles of paint. What the heck? That's a lot. It's actually not, though. It might only be, 4 hues. It might only be maybe 6 different pigments, or something along those lines. So it's actually very, very limited. And to me, then the more I paint, the more that I find that that is true. That actually what gets at capturing the relationships within what you're seeing the best, what ends up feeling the most naturalistic, the most organic, the most true to the experience of what you're looking at, is actually a very simple, very limited range of things. And that creates the harmony, that creates the inner logic of the color palette, that creates the feeling of truth, which is something I think about a lot. It doesn't come from having 40 colors on your palette. It comes from just like a little handful, and understanding how to put them together. It's like, what do they say about country music, that it's 3 chords and the truth? That's what painting is too, right? It's like maybe 3 colors and the truth, and then you have a good color palette. So I kind of got on a little tangent there, but I hope that kind of makes sense. And by the way, I talked about that idea a lot more in my studio painting fundamentals class that I taught live, but now it's recorded. So you can get a much bigger, longer explanation there. And then actually, I want to make an Instagram post about that, because, not to complain or anything, but lately someone kind of accused me of doing that just because it looked cool. And I was like, no. So I think I might do a longer explanation, a post on Instagram to explain it a little bit more. But anyway, I thank you. I hope that answers your question. I hope that was helpful.
Okay, you've given me a couple of ideas for some questions
great.
there. So we've got a question here from Thomas, which is, he's asking, should you get very good at drawing values before dealing with colors? Yeah. So basically, I'm going to ask you, how do you go about moving from being an artist that draws, predominantly works with kind of dry media, to then moving on to being someone who's exploring painting? How do you make that sometimes seemingly huge jump from there?
Yes. Well, what I usually tell people, like, I mean, painting, oil painting is not even just oil painting, whatever medium you're using is so complex. Not to intimidate anybody or scare anybody, but there's a lot of complexity. You have to think about what kind of brush are you using? What kind of surface are you using? How much paint are you putting on the brush? Are you adding medium to it? Is your paint kind of oily, or is it kind of not very oily? There's just like layers and layers and layers of problem solving, of like tactile learning, of very like kind of subtle, deep level understanding. That's just very difficult. And it's hard to take all of that on at the same time. So if you're trying to learn color, if you're trying to learn how to manipulate the material, if you're trying to learn about the materials, why is one surface different from another? Why is one brush different from another? And by the way, trying to use value and trying to do a reasonably good drawing all at the same time, that's like a lot of stuff. So, right. And there's probably more things than just what I'm saying there. So my suggestion is to try to separate out a few of those things A live class that I just wrapped up teaching was charcoal master copies. And in that class, we used charcoal, so a dry medium, but with a very painterly technique, using willow charcoal and even using paintbrushes and other tools to manipulate it and move it around. And that's a very painterly technique. It mimics oil painting specifically a lot because the charcoal doesn't really stay put on the surface. You can't put it down and then just easily go over it, or, it just moves. So in that way, it's a lot like oil painting. And just doing that kind of gets you into a mindset that's more like a painter, and not so much as a draftsman working with something like graphite or ink. Not that there's anything wrong with those mediums. Those are wonderful mediums to learn. But if it's a medium that more or less stays put where you put it, it's not going to really be like painting. And then after that, I would say do a lot of monochromatic painting. Paint in oil, but just use black and white. And a huge benefit of that also is that it's not very expensive. Titanium white, ivory black, those are always the least expensive pigments in any brand's range. So you can, by the way, afford to get professional grade paints, which I recommend that everybody do. There is nothing sadder in this world than student grade titanium white. Like, no, please don't. So get professional grade paints. Just get two colors, black and white. Get something like oil painting paper, which I like to recommend to beginner artists as well, because it's a little bit more like drawing in that since it's a very absorbent surface when you paint on it with oil, your paint sticks a bit more, and so it doesn't just slip slide around all over the place. So it's a little bit easier to control. And then if you do those things and spend a lot of time working in just monochromatic oil paint on a helpful surface, oil painting paper, well, first of all, you will learn your medium. You'll start to learn the medium, just what it's like to move around the material. You'll get better at value. And then when you add in color, you won't be quite so overwhelmed. So that is my suggestion there. I hope that helps. But yeah, you can work on value and painting at the same time to answer the question, but do it in monochrome. And then I always suggest, do as much drawing as you can, always, because drawing is painting. They are not separate things. You guys, of course, all know this, but drawing and painting are continuations of the same activity. So just because you're using a brush doesn't mean that you're not drawing anymore. In fact, it's just a more complicated activity, because when you use the brush, you really have to think like each brush stroke that you put down has to be the right shape, the right value, have the right edges, have the right proportion, blah, blah, blah. So every time you make a mark on your painting, you are drawing. So always be drawing, basically. ABD. Hope that answers
yeah, that's a beautiful kind of way to be thinking about it, actually. I love that.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask a slightly less technical, more personal question now. And I know certainly from being an avid follower of you on Instagram that words mean a lot
Yes.
to you. So is your art influenced or inspired by poetry? And if that is the case, what is the relationship between poetry and painting in your life?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I love that. Thank you, whoever asked that.
Yeah, that was a great question.
I read a lot of poetry. I think about poetry a lot. It's gonna sound terrible, but like I can't remember the last time I sat down and just read like a novel. I don't really do that. I read poetry. And I guess I say that maybe my paintings are not directly inspired so much by poetry, but I think about it more maybe aesthetically, because poetry as an art form really relies on concision, on making language very pointed and therefore very powerful. In a poem, especially a good poem, and there's a lot of bad poems out there, by the way, but in a good poem, every single word, every single syllable even is important. And so even if the poem is only, just a few lines long and you could read it in a few seconds, there's layers and layers of meaning into it. and you could really think about it and learn more about it and understand more and see more in it every time you read it. And I think that is something that painters should also think about and do, basically, because you can't paint everything. You have to have a frame somewhere, right? Your painting has to end at some point. So that's concision, right? You can't paint everything in the subject. No matter how much I paint a rose, it's never going to be a rose. It's only ever going to be a painting of a rose, right? And I can't paint every single little thing that I see in it. I'd be there forever. So you have to make decisions about what is there, what am I choosing to include, and what am I choosing not to include, and how can I make the things that I choose to include as meaningful and as powerful and as potent as possible. And I think, yeah, painters should think about that. I think embedded in that question, she almost said it, but there's a phrase, I think, don't quote me on this because I actually haven't read this, but I think it comes from the Ars Poetica by Horace, ut pictura poesis, which means as in painting, so in poetry. And I think back then, at least my understanding, and I'm like not an expert in this, so if there's any like people who are like us experts in the classics, like please, you can correct me. But I think the idea back then was that poetry was the popular entertainment, right? That'd be like going to the movies or whatever. And painting was considered more of a high art. And what Horace was saying basically was that, no, if you're a poet, you should consider your art as important as a high art as painting, right? And I think today painters can maybe do the opposite. You think of it like it's a haiku, or like it's a sonnet, or something that has to be extremely precise and very distilled and still beautiful and expressive, but within a very limited constraints. That to me is making art in general, is working expressively within constraints. So I say other way around. Ut poesis pictura. That's probably wrong. I don't speak Latin, but that's why I hope that answers the question. Something like that. That was a long answer for a short question, but
that was a beautiful question, though,
yes.
wasn't it? Really, and a really great question for you, definitely. Okay, so I've got one here that I'm going to pop up and ask an extra little bit as well. So this is from Cindy. I've often heard artists say you should draw and paint from life. How is that better from a photograph? Yeah. And if you are working from photographs, how can you do that in a way that's going to work well?
Yeah. The thing is, the thing that I think a lot of beginner painters especially maybe don't totally understand is that working from photographs is actually harder. When you're working from a photograph, you have to do a lot of translation in your head in order to understand what you're seeing and then make that into a painting. So if you're looking at a photograph is a flat thing, of course. So you have to look at it and interpret it as a three-dimensional thing, right? And how is that photograph representing something that's three-dimensional, right? And kind of look for clues, look for indications as to what the photograph is telling you about the three-dimensional quality of the actual form itself that's no longer there. And then you have to take that three-dimensional thinking and then translate that back into a two-dimensional depiction in your painting or in your drawing. So that's a very complicated little thing to do. Now, I'm not an idealist on this, okay? It's 2023. People are gonna draw and paint from photographs. I draw and paint from photographs all the time. I kind of have to sometimes because it takes me so long to finish a painting that I don't usually have access to the flowers anymore after, by the time the painting is done, it might be like months later. So, but when you are studying from life, you are, first of all, understanding what is three-dimensional form actually like. What are the things that you are seeing in that subject that tell you that it's three-dimensional? What are the ways that the values change? What are the edges that you see? How does the light affect the form? How does the light change from one temperature to another temperature? Or how does it fall off? Or how do the edges change? All of that is stuff that you can observe much more easily from direct observation than you can from a photograph. when you have a lot of experience doing that, you can look at a photograph and sort of see it. But if you're not very experienced working from life, you're going to look at a photograph and probably end up just kind of copying it. So yeah, you do have to, I think, if you're working from photographs, do as much studying from life as you can, especially early in your education, so that you understand what life really looks like. Then the other thing about photographs is that, well, I could talk about this probably for a long time. But another thing is that a camera doesn't see the same way that you see, right? A camera is going to sharpen up a lot of things. It's going to make some areas very flat when there might be more information there. It's going to make some areas seem very distinct when it might be not very distinct to your eye. A camera is just not a perfect one-to-one for a human eye, right? So that's another thing. And the last thing I want to say that I always notice a lot myself is just how much a camera distorts color, how much more sensitive, you know, you are as like a human being with actual eyes and a brain and a nervous system, for seeing and interpreting and understanding color and seeing a lot of depth and nuance in color. And a lot of that gets kind of either flattened out and diminished in a photograph, or now, especially if you're taking pictures with your cell phone a lot, they'll get kind of amped up or distorted or have a bunch of like weird filters and stuff applied to them that you're not even aware of to make it look a certain way. And that's also like not great because it's not reality, right? So we're all going to end up working from photographs at least some of the time. It's a modern era, but for your own learning and for your own understanding of observing reality, observing light, observing color and form, etc., you should do as much studying from life, I think, as possible, and from imagination, because that helps you to build your visual memory too. So I hope that answers your question. That's a good question, though. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, and Katie's saying she's never thought of flowers dead before they've been done painted.
Yeah.
So she's kind of like, that's a really striking, and it's that kind of like, you know, you've caught that moment that's now gone.
Yeah.
There's something quite incredible about that, isn't there, with the whole flowers. Okay, so next question that I've got here. Who are your lesser known, old and contemporary masters?
Yes.
Who do you think other artists should check out and study?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite painters of all time, I guess this would classify as an old master, Jan van Huysum, who was a Dutch golden age flower painter, one of the greatest flower painters who ever lived, in my opinion. Just absolutely incredible painter. There's another, actually a husband and wife team, which I think is kind of cool. Not exactly old masters, they're kind of more in the same era as like Sargent and Zorn and people like that. But Thomas Dewing and his wife Maria Oki Dewing, both incredible painters, so beautiful. Kind of incredible to think like, oh, there were two of these people and they would hang out all the time because they were married. Geez. How amazing would that be? So those are two artists that I really enjoy a lot. Philip de Laszlo, who was another portrait painter kind of the same era. Amazing, incredible painter. Trying to think if I can think of any. Did they also say contemporary? Was that part of the question?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So who's painting now that you kind of
Painting now
enjoy
that
the
I
work
mean, a
of?
lot of people, you know, Carl Russo. I feel like maybe people know who he is, but I love his paintings. They are true labors of love. You know, I mentioned Jan van Huysum, who was a Dutch Golden Age painter, and Carl Russo kind of does a very similar kind of a work that's very much inspired by that era of painting. Something that's very interesting about the Dutch Golden Age flower painters is that, you know, back then you couldn't just go to the florist and like buy a bunch of flowers and just arrange them. Things were very seasonal. Things weren't always available. And so the arrangement, the flower arrangements that you see in a lot of those paintings never existed. They either painted them at different times, or they only painted them from images that they had from like manuals, even from like botanical illustrations or stuff like that. So it's very imaginative work, and Carl Russo kind of does the same thing. And I see someone is asking about the couple that I mentioned. It's Thomas Dewing, Dewing, and his wife Maria Oki Dewing. Maria, I think it's Maria, or is it Maria? I think it's Maria. Oakey Dewing, Dewing. Thank you. So yeah, Carl Russo, love his work. I had another one, but shoot, it might be gone. Oh, darn it. Okay. If I think of it, I'll say it. But that's a good question. I love that. And if maybe other people have other kind of lesser known artists, like please share, because I think when you're a student, when you're learning this stuff, the best thing you can do is go look at as much good art as you can possibly stand. Like go just look at stuff. I think it is just a way to build your taste, a way to develop your eye, and also a way to figure out what it is that you really like in art. Because sometimes you might be in school and taking classes and doing courses and learning all of this stuff, and you might not even 100% know why. So develop your taste and start to develop a direction, especially if that's a little unclear to you now. And a great way to do that is just looking at art. So thank you for the question, by the way.
Okay, well, that takes me in really beautifully here into asking you about your new live class that's coming up very soon. Yeah, because, well, you can tell us all about it, Catherine. So why don't you talk a little bit about this new live class that's coming up?
Well, it's sort of a follow-up to the last live class that I just wrapped up teaching. Time is a flat circle. Was it last week? I don't even know. Whenever it was. Which that class was charcoal master copies, and we did that painterly technique that I just mentioned earlier, and studied master paintings, and it was kind of a class designed to help students actually do master studies and actually notice some things about how the composition is put together, how are the values arranged, how are the edges composed, stuff like that. But with a technique that is very painterly, with the idea that you would practice a painterly drawing technique and then move on to oil painting. So that's the idea with the new classes, that we're going to do master studies in oil this time. And if you did the master copies class, or even if you didn't, maybe you're just someone that is wanting to begin oil painting and want a little bit of a sort of an easing into that new medium, this class would be great for you. We're going to start out with painting in monochrome, really basically leaving off exactly where the last class ended. It'll be a very similar kind of approach, a very similar kind of way of walking through the study, just in oil instead of in charcoal. And then we are going to gradually then move into color and study again a few different subjects: still life, landscape, and then figure portrait. And one nice thing about this class is that we designed it so that students could spend 2 weeks on their paintings, especially later in the class when we get into color. So instead of being kind of launched into this new medium and then just do a painting in a week, go, people have a little bit more time to develop the painting, get some feedback, see some more demonstration, and then go back to it and develop it further, which I think is very helpful when you're first learning to paint, to have to break it down into a few steps and to lengthen the process just a little bit until it becomes more familiar, basically. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited about it. I love teaching classes like this because, well, first of all, I just feel like I learned so much. I get to do a bunch of master studies myself, which is, even in the process of teaching the last one, there are so many things that I learned just doing the master studies for the demonstrations myself. That was always really eye-opening. So I'm always excited to do classes like this because I learn a lot, but it's also just so fun to see what the students do as well. And I just should say I was incredibly impressed by the student work in the last class. I thought it was just so impressive the way that the students just really dived in and embraced charcoal with open arms. It's not a medium that everyone loves. And did incredible work, really, really beautiful work. And I think learned a lot. So yeah, if you were in that class, if you are curious about oil painting, I'm here for you. let me guide you through. I'll be your Virgil to your Dante, and guide you through oil painting. So, and I don't say that about all of my classes. Actually, I probably do because I have the best students. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and the last class was a lot of fun. So thank you also for everyone that participated in that. I see a few of you in the chat, so thank you.
Yeah, and actually someone's just asked a kind of question that I'm intrigued by as well. So, you know, working from master copies, what kind of things do we learn when we study from a master?
Yeah, can I say everything? That's probably too broad. But, you know, what is that particular master really good at, right? I mean, what is the thing that you look at in their work and say, whoa, dang. Like the last charcoal class we ended, I think we ended, yeah, we ended, I did a demonstration of a Rembrandt painting for the very last demo of the class. And Rembrandt, I think we could say a lot about him. He was just one of the greatest painters who ever lived. But he composed with light. He used light to describe form. He used very, very simple colors, not a complex color palette at all. He did all of that magic with just value and with describing light. So if that's important to you, if that's something that you want to learn about, well, you should go study Rembrandt. If you are someone who is curious about, well, how do you compose a really balanced, solid, serene kind of, you know, a perfectly balanced landscape? Well, you should go look at Edgar Payne, right? I mean, I don't think anyone was as good at just designing shapes, designing values, designing even brushstrokes as Edgar Payne when it comes to landscape painting. So if that's something that you're interested in, go study Edgar Payne. I could just go on and on and on. I mean, what are you interested in? Are you interested in the application of paint, of making beautiful brushstrokes? Go study Sargent, go study it stroke for stroke, or go study of Philip de Laszlo, who I mentioned earlier. Are you interested in really, really beautiful edges? Go study Thomas Dewing that I mentioned earlier, someone who designed incredibly beautiful edges. I mean, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you are feeling like you want to learn and really excel at and develop in your own work, I guarantee it, there's someone out there who does it at a super high level at some point in history. Go steal from them as much as you can. So whatever it is, composing, designing values, using color, describing form with edges, whatever it is, you can learn all of those things studying from the masters, 100%. And in my opinion, I think it's one of the best ways to learn. So that's why I teach it.
Okay, so I've got a couple of little quick questions. Do you think it would be possible to do your master copy class with soft pastel rather than oil?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. You could try.
You could absolutely try. I'm trying to think because
Yeah.
I have done a little bit of pastel, and I'm just trying to think about the order of operations of, do you start with your darks or do you start with your lights? And I think you start with your darks.
Yeah, you probably start with your darks.
I think you start with your darks. So yeah, you probably could. Yeah. I think it would be harder to do it in something like watercolor. I think if you wanted to do the class in watercolor, like you could. but you would have to do a lot more translation to,
Yeah, you would have to do a lot of working it
yeah,
out
you'd have to
yourself,
do a
wouldn't
lot of
you?
working it out yourself, which is not to say that you wouldn't be able to learn from that. You might also pick different artists. I think if you're doing soft pastel though, I think you could still study the same artists. You might just be paying attention to different things. So if I'm talking
Yeah.
about like particular brush strokes, or if I'm you know, talking about you know, pulling and pushing the brush a certain way, that might not apply as much if you're using soft pastels. But you would certainly still learn a lot about color. You would learn a lot about value. You would learn a lot about just drawing, just good drawing skills in general. So no reason not to try it, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, and someone's asking for master flower painters, but I think, did you name a few there earlier,
I
didn't you? Do you
mentioned a
have?
few, yeah. I mean, Jan van Huysum, Carl Russo was another one I mentioned. Maria Oki Doing painted mainly flowers. She was incredible. There's a lot of living artists. Katie Whipple, I really admire her. She does amazing flower paintings. Richard Schmid, of course, very good at painting flowers. I'm trying to think. Oh, I mean, Henri Fontaine-Latour, duh. I can't believe I let that escape my memory for a second, but incredible flower painter, Henri Fontaine-Latour. Um, uh, yeah, those are just a few off the top of my head. I'm sure I could come up with more. But if you're looking for master flower painters, go look at the Dutch Golden Age painters, because a lot of them painted flowers. It was one of their, you know, important genres then. And you'll find some of the most incredible flower painters and still life painters from that era. So yeah, Dutch Golden Age painters, some of the best.
Okay, so here's a question from a little bit earlier on. Hi, Catherine. I'm doing the figure classes and drawing foundations module. Why are gesture drawings timed? Why didn't we learn anatomy first before drawing with force? My drawings look pretty bad. I'm struggling to understand the pros of these approaches. I want some kind of buy-in before continuing.
Okay.
Thanks. So,
Wow.
so what advice can, and actually a lot of our students are in this moment just now where they're early figure drawing and they're kind of like wondering how to kind
Yeah.
of, you know, work their way into it. What tips do you
Yeah.
have for people to get into figure drawing?
Trust the process for one thing. Meaning arises in the presence of doubt. So if you are doubting the process, that doesn't mean that you have to stop. You can doubt and still continue. First of all, I just want to say that. Why are gesture drawings timed? Well, part of it, I think, maybe goes back to that concision thing that I was saying earlier. If you only have 5 minutes, well, you have to be a little bit concise. You have to do some kind of process of distillation of what is actually happening here. It's very tempting to say or to look at a figure, a model, a reference image, and to think like, all right, well, I have to draw that. I better start measuring or whatever. And it's actually not the way. It's not the way to a deeper understanding. You know, that would be like if I put a rose in front of you and you started counting petals. It's actually not getting down to the meat of the issue. It's not getting down to the essential thing. And neither really is anatomy, which is why we don't start with that. There's a more essential thing even beyond that to understand before you start studying all these more complicated things. You don't start counting petals. You don't start drawing little veins on the petals. You don't start drawing little stamens and such before understanding the simple form of the thing that you're looking at, or the simple idea of its essential quality, right? So that's really what gesture drawing is about. It's about understanding movement. It's about understanding movement through space. It's about understanding what is the action that is present, what is a distillation of the thing that I am looking at. All of that is incredibly important for being able to draw. You know, it's sort of like if I asked you, what is the Harry Potter series about? If you started with, well, Harry Potter lived at 13 Privet Drive under the stairs, and just told me the whole thing, well, that's actually not helpful. You got to do a process of editing down, of understanding an essential thing, of distilling, of concision, to actually be able to develop anything further. And that's one thing that gesture is about. It's certainly more complicated than that. And there are definitely other instructors who will give you a much more subtle and beautiful explanation of what we're doing with gesture. But it is absolutely important to do before anatomy, important to do before anything else, in fact. And that's why we teach it. And there is a reason, by the way, that any good drawing program, any good foundational approach, traditional approach to drawing involves the figure. You'll see that throughout all of history. And if anyone says that, yeah, you can learn to draw, you can do all of this stuff without drawing the figure, they're not telling you accurate information. I was going to say something else. I have to talk about concision. But yeah, I trust the process a little bit. I know a lot of people find force to be very challenging and very difficult and a little bit hard to parse and a little bit opaque. Please see it through. I believe you can do it. There is more stuff coming. You will get more answers. And at some point, you're going to think, oh my God, I get it. It just might not happen right away. And that's learning to draw in a nutshell, I think, is being confused and confused and confused and confused and struggling. And then one day it's like, oh my God, what? So just be patient, have your doubts, but just push through anyway.
Okay, and I'm just going to take this opportunity to mention that anyone who does want to do some figure drawing tonight, there's a free figure drawing session on the digital campus. So yeah, so if you want to give your figure drawing a little kind of brush off and get in there and do some figure, here we go. So I'm going to, I know, I'm just going to go back to some more personal questions now. So let me have a little look here. So yeah, let me see a good one. I'll try and get a nice one here for you to answer. Okay, so why do you do this? What is your I don't know. What is your drive?
Sorry.
And what sustains you?
Oh my God, that's kind of a funny question. You know, I know there's probably days where everybody's kind of like, oh my God, why did I pick this? This is so hard. You know what? I love teaching. I love seeing my students learn and share their work and get excited about what they're doing. And I also get so excited to help them through their challenges and their struggles. And when they bump up against a wall, you know, I kind of want to be the person that people are like, I'm having a hard time. Can you please help me? Because I know that not everybody, especially in art schools, you don't always get that, right? I mean, I've heard terrible stories from students saying that they gave up drawing for years because of something that an art teacher said to them. And I don't ever want to be that person. So I find it very, very, very sustaining to just work with students, basically, and to you know, to see how passionate and how excited they are. I find very sustaining for me too. And then just besides that, I just love painting. I just love what I do. If, you know, if I just didn't have to do chores, if I didn't have to cook, if I didn't have to, you know, pay any bills or go to the grocery store or do anything else, I would just be here all day painting all the time and teaching, and then nothing else. That would be it. So, you know, being a little bit fanatical, a little bit crazy, a little bit like extra insane towards your art, you know, that's what I do at least. But yeah, basically being a teacher, that really I find extremely sustaining. Marion, I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, I think it drives us,
Yeah.
doesn't it? It's exciting to be involved with, you know, and it's also seeing people have those moments that you talked about, that moment of realization.
Yeah.
You just get to share that joy constantly, which is
that
phenomenal.
is the best. Yeah.
So I think actually a lovely follow-up question here from Adam, and I'm just going to expand on it just a bit. It'd be quite nice to know how you actually got interested in art in the first place, and then your path through art into your education and your career. If you just want to share a little bit of that journey with us, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it's probably a very boring answer, but I just always really liked to draw. I'm the youngest of 3 kids, and so and it was the 90s. There were no cell phones. There were no iPad games. So, if my mom was, taking my sister to whatever after school thing she was doing, or my brother to whatever activities he was doing, I'd be stuck in the car, bored. And my mom was amazing. She always had like pens and little pencils and things like that with her, and yellow legal pads of paper, and I would just sit and draw on those like all the time. And I would just like kind of just sit for hours and just do that basically to entertain myself while I was waiting for my sister to get out of like dance class or whatever she was doing. So that was kind of like my first memories of drawing and making any kind of art at all, was just out of boredom, basically. And I was very lucky that I had parents that were supportive, that they could see that I was interested in drawing and interested in visual art, and they would, sign me up for like art camps and stuff when I was a kid, or take me to the bookstore to look at art books and stuff like that. I mean, I did tons of that when I was a kid. So it was just always a part of my life. It was always something that I did. And maybe I've always just been a little insane, but I just never really wanted to do anything else particularly. I never really had other, long-term goals or aspirations that were really interesting to me. I just always wanted to do art. That was basically what I did. I took a year off of school after I graduated high school. I worked for my parents and I went to art school, and then I went to college in New York. I went to art school there too. Did a lot of extra art stuff on the side while I was in college. And then came back and did more art school basically. And I started teaching very young. And I didn't really have goals of being a teacher right away. That wasn't really on my radar, but I started teaching, basically when I was 18. And so I had to figure out, I think very quickly, because I wasn't that skilled, I had to figure out how to communicate with students and how to share knowledge with them and how to direct them. Because I didn't maybe have as much technical skill as I would have liked to have to just do a really impressive demo and then just like walk away. I had to learn to be a little bit more hands-on than that. But that was really a blessing, actually, even though at the time it was stressful because I felt like I wasn't doing a good job. I think starting teaching so young ended up helping me to be a little bit more skillful, I hope, in that way. And that's basically what I've been doing ever since. I've been doing fine art and teaching. Essentially since I was 18. It's been, I'm always very happy that I made that choice, basically. It wasn't always easy. I had a lot of fear about making that choice and just thinking like, oh my God, this is so hard. Why did I pick this? I could be like doing something much easier probably, and more secure, and having just some painting time on the side. But I'm glad that I made the choice. I wake up every day and I just think like, I'm so grateful to be an artist and to be a teacher and to be part of this community and to have all you guys here in my classes and learning with me. It's just been something I felt incredibly fortunate to have. So there you go, Adam. I hope that answers your question at least a little bit.
Yeah, and I'd say that we're all absolutely grateful that you made those choices as well. And and for me, one of the things that always strikes me when I watch your lessons is your clarity and your precision with your instruction. And I think it does come from that sense of the early days of having to teach people. Yeah. It just makes that instruction so clear, and it's absolutely wonderful. Okay, so we're nearly at the end, Catherine. Let me see. Do you want to take one more
Sure,
question?
why not?
Does anyone want to? Let's see. Pop in a question while I'm reading my question. See if I've got a good one. If anyone put in one into the chat, see if I can get me a good question, guys. Come on.
Oh, well, Joe just asked if I hit any walls and how did I get through them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's actually it. Yeah, and I've got a question here which goes along with that. How do you overcome? I mean, this is something you've been doing a lot with students in coaching, talking about, you know, dealing with these sorts of things. So how do you overcome creative block?
That's a good question.
And did you hit any walls? And how did you get through those walls?
I definitely hit walls and I definitely hit creative blocks. I think when you hit those things though, when you hit those walls or when you just feel like, I mean, I remember there were times where I have taken paintings and thrown them across the room. I have taken flowers and thrown them violently into the dumpster. I have had to walk out of the studio and sit outside and just reassess my life choices. I mean, I have done those things. I mean, so don't think that I haven't. I absolutely have. And someone told me one time that when you hit those walls like that, or where you just hit a point where it's like, I can't do this, so this isn't working, or I'm just not, something is not jiving. That can be sometimes an indication to, go in a different direction or to change something within yourself so you can do those things, right? And both things might be true, right? At the same time. If you're making art and just having a huge block with what you're doing, maybe it's an indication that you should be doing something different with your art, right? I think that's also true, especially when you are in school, that there are a lot of very strong influences on you, directing you into certain directions, right? That's true at an atelier, especially. That's true. I think that's just true generally. Other students might have particular interests that influence you. Your instructors might have particular interests that influence you. And it's important to understand, are those your interests or are those just things that you are taking from somebody else? And I think sometimes if you're really bumping into a creative block, or if you're really just, head first running into a wall, it's maybe an indication that those actually aren't for you. You maybe actually should do something different. And maybe that's why I'm painting flowers instead of painting more figurative work or commissioned portraits, which I did want to do at some point, or thought I wanted to do. Sometimes those walls are not barriers that you have to just force yourself through, but indications that there may be a different path you should be paying attention to. So that's one thing. And then as for creative blocks, well, I think that first one actually has a lot to do with that if you're forcing yourself to do something that's actually not in your soul, you're probably going to feel pretty blocked about that, right? But besides that, I think creativity, you maybe can't force that either. It's something you can set up the circumstances to allow it to happen, but you can't just be like, all right, creativity, go, and have it happen. It's not going to work like that. It'd be nice if it did. So you can set up the circumstances to invite it, but you can't just like drag it in and make it happen. So what is it that is blocking you? Are you scared? Do you feel like you have too much pressure on you? Are you too anxious? Are you taking on too much? There's a lot of answers to that, a lot of possibilities. For me, I find that practicing mindfulness is incredibly important. I think that getting out of the studio sometimes is incredibly important. Go enjoy nature, go look at more art, hopefully in a museum, someplace not in your studio, just on your phone or whatever. Go hang out with your peers. I think talking to other artists and painting and working with other artists, I think is incredibly inspiring. But also, allow yourself to move past your fear. Making art that is really meaningful and important to you is probably going to be scary. That's not a bad thing. You don't want to be apathetic about it. That would be sad. So you're probably always going to be a little bit scared if it's something that's important to you. But if you can develop with practice the ability to just move ahead, even with your fears and even with your doubts, good things can happen, right? So the way we practice that, I mean, I guess probably you'll have to, I don't know, go look at the discussion session slides maybe from those weeks that we talked about that. But yeah, I could recommend a book list too if people wanted me to. But yeah, basically go read, like, for example, there's a new book by Rick Rubin out on creativity. It's a great book. Go read, it's a classic by Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way, another wonderful book. The Path of Drawing by Patty Watwood, incredible book. If you're feeling creatively blocked, go buy those, go get those books, read them, invite them into your practice, live them every day. And I think you will find that it really does help. It takes some time and patience. It takes sometimes moving with fear, with doubt. But you guys are all cool and brave and smart, and you can do it. So thank you for the question.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Catherine.
Absolutely.
And I think someone's asked the question here. It is okay to take the master class. If you had the
yeah,
charcoal,
of course.
you said that earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
Yeah. So yeah.
Jump in.
Do it. Everyone do
it.
Yeah. Do all of Catherine's courses. They're wonderful. So yeah, thank you everybody for coming. Just a reminder that we've got the figure session over on Discord, and thank you for all your wonderful questions and all of the reactions in the chat. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next event, which isn't it? Dylan probably knows. What's the next event, Dylan? It's Amanda,
right,
isn't it? It's the Q&A with Amanda, and that's at, I think it's at 3:00 PST, I believe. But don't entirely trust me on that one. It is. Wow. I got it right. Okay, so thank you everybody. That was awesome.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you so much for hosting. You're always so nice to talk to. I love hanging out with you. You make this much more comfortable than I would be otherwise, probably.
Yeah, we're like comfy, almost in the same room.
I know, practically. It could be. You could just turn around. Yeah. All right.
Bye
everybody. See you.